Welcome back to another edition of History in Your Own Backyard. I'm Satoli. Today we're in Vevey, Indiana, and we're at the most sorrowful Mother of God Catholic Church with Dick Yanikoski, correct?
Yes.
Okay. What can you tell us about this church? It's a small church, it's a Catholic church, but it's really beautiful on the inside. What can you tell us about the history of it?
Thank you for characterizing it that way. Well, first off, we're the only Catholic church in Switzerland County and in Ohio County. So the history of this church in some ways parallels the development of the Catholic community, which remains small. This area was settled in the late 1700s and early 1800s, but it wasn't until 1834 that the first Catholic was identified. Father Michael Shaw came from Madison to visit this woman, whose name was Mrs. George Pleasance, one of the early settlers. And from that point, it took about 20 years until there were maybe 24 families that had at least one Catholic in it, but nowhere to have Mass. So in the 1850s, as it turned out, one of the descendants of the Dufour family, who came from Switzerland as the early settlers and wine growers, gave this county its name, Switzerland County, and Vevey, named after Vevey in Switzerland, their home area, became a Catholic, Francis Dufour. Okay. And things began to happen then because he opened his house for monthly worship by a visiting priest. Later, when the numbers got a little too large, there were about 25 adults by that time in 1859.
And he lived here in town?
He lived in town,
okay.
And when it became a little too large for his home, another member of the family, Perrette Dufour, who wrote a book about the history of the county, opened up part of his business on Sunday so they could use a larger space to worship. And that's the way it was. The community didn't grow very much after that because in the 1840s and 50s, the Know Nothing movement in the United States that was very afraid of papal influence and therefore of Catholics kept the Catholic population under restraint, let us say.
Did it?
Yes, but in the early 1870s, Vevey was already known as a furniture making center. There was a chair factory and another furniture factory, all within a couple of blocks here. Well, a much larger and better funded one came from Cincinnati, Union Furniture Company, and set up shop literally about 100 yards from this location. Okay. They were mostly German Catholics. And in due time, that is 3 years' time, they came up with the resources along with the existing Catholic families to build this church. Huh. So it was constructed in 1875. And
this was the first church in
This was the
town.
First Catholic church in town of any kind. There was no wooden structure. They went directly from the borrowed property that the Dufours were loaning them to this church. It was a very simple church made of brick, 36 feet wide, 65 feet long, meant to be small. And the materials for it mostly came from outside. This large altar area with the columns is all one piece, and it came down the river from Covington, Kentucky on a steamboat and was carried on wagons up here and installed in this church.
Now, is that marble?
No, that's actually, that was repainted. That's all wood.
Okay.
That was painted faux marble in the renovation that took place in 2009,
okay.
which I can mention in a minute. But there were side altars that were made by the local woodworkers, and much of what else was in the church at that time was also made by local woodworkers. So we're at 1875. The Bishop of Vincennes, Indiana, which was the predecessor archdiocese to Indianapolis, came here to receive the church in the name of the church from the local community. And more than 1,500 people came on the river. This was when this church had maybe 30 families. More than 1,500 people came on steamboats on the river, Catholics from Covington, from Louisville, from Cincinnati, from Madison, for the dedication of this church. And they paraded from the wharf down on Ferry Street, straight up Ferry Street, and surrounded this church for its dedication. Probably the largest collection of Catholics ever in Switzerland County.
They probably doubled the population here in Vivi.
Yeah, they did at that time. So the church grew, as most churches do, up until the 1920s, and then in the 1930s, the Depression hit, and it closed the furniture factory for a number of years. Many of those people left. It also closed the church. The church was literally boarded up. The church was closed for some years, reopened after the Second World War, suffered again through lack of numbers, nearly closed. Masses became monthly instead of weekly. And then in 1984, the church, with a different pastor, significantly went through a renovation. And during that time, they added the brick reception area to the front of the church, which was a major addition. They brought plumbing indoors. We had a restroom for the first time. And a number of other improvements were made. But it was still a fairly stark church. Fast forward to 2009, and we had another renovation, and that's the renovation that produced what you see today. A much more colorful church. The altar and the other wooden furnishings were all custom made. The mosaic was done by a local artist. Some of the original structures, the sacristy where the priest would vest was off here to the right. That was all removed. Interestingly enough, one of the things that was changed in 2009 was the front doors that were put on in 1984 that were rather modern, and the parishioners wanted more classic wooden doors. So we now have more classic wooden doors.
Well, tell me a little bit about these stained glass windows.
Sure.
Are those the original?
They are the original windows, and since we're standing more or less in the middle of the church, that window right there that is has the name Clement Deman on it, he was the superintendent and treasurer of the Union Furniture Factory.
The one that started all this?
Yes, the one that.
Okay.
And this here, the Thuneman family, another German family, that was John Thuneman. He was a furniture maker, and Frank Ditkin was another furniture maker. So it's pretty clear. Okay. We don't have the history of every name here, but those three we can document for sure.
Okay.
We're connected to the furniture industry here. So it was the connection to the Catholic community of Cincinnati through woodworkers that significant contributions were made to get this parish established in a brick building. The few other things about this, there is a cast iron bell in the bell tower that still works. It's a hand-rung bell. I'm probably one of the few people who knows there are actually two clappers on that bell.
Is there?
Yes, there's the main clapper that we ring every Mass before the service begins.
Okay.
And there's a side clapper which hits on the outer rim as opposed to hitting on the inside.
It's like a hammer?
It's like a hammer. It hits
Okay.
on the outer rim, and that used to be for when there were funerals. As I said, we're linked with with the Prince of Peace in Madison. So we share a single pastor who lives there and comes here every weekend to celebrate Mass with us.
And you were telling me earlier about the pews?
These pews, yes, these pews were provided by St. Mary of the Woods College in Terre Haute, Indiana, during the renovation of 1984. And like many of the things, the statues and the chairs that are in our reception area came from the local funeral home when they redecorated. Catholic churches tend to be resourceful. We're original recyclers of usable materials.
Absolutely.
I do want to mention one last thing, and that's these Stations of the Cross. During the period, I'm not sure exactly when, but somewhere in the 1950s, 60s, when the church nearly closed again, Masses went to monthly because participation had fallen. These were removed and put up for auction. We're not quite sure how they got removed and put up for auction, but Martha Bladen from the Historical Society was smart enough to realize these would make a great addition to the historical collections of the Switzerland County Museum.
Yeah.
And when the church was renovated, she gave them back to the church.
Good.
We are the only church in the United Catholic Church that has this name.
Oh, really?
We are the only most sorrowful Mother of God
In the
Catholic Church.
Archdiocese?
No,
or-
in the United States.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay, because I've never heard of it before.
No, there are other, like there's Our Lady of Sorrows, there are variations on the theme,
Okay.
but the most sorrowful Mother of God Church, Catholic Church, is the only one that has that name.
Thanks again for watching another edition of History in Your Own Backyard. Today we were in Vevey, Indiana at the most sorrowful Mother of God Catholic Church. Dick, thanks for your time. We
you.
really appreciate it. It's a beautiful church you've got here. I really like it. Remember, travel slowly and stop often.